When officers arrived, they went over to the location of the green bag. Sheriff Bobby Vance crouched down to look at what was inside and literally gagged. The officers then cut the bag open and there was the naked, decaying body of a teenage girl. And due to her advanced state of decomposition, the girl was pretty much unrecognizable. The coroner claimed the body was of a young, white teenage girl with reddish-brown hair. They said she was somewhere around 16 to 18 years old, 5 feet tall, and had no other identifying features. But the exact COD was hard to tell. There were no bullets, bullet wounds, slash marks. There was some discoloration on the right side of the victim's skull that almost looked like she suffered a whack to the head, but it didn't seem like that's what caused her to pass away. This led the detectives to believe the assailant hit her in the head and stuffed her in the green bag, where she ultimately lost her life due to lack of oxygen. At the time she was discovered by Wilbur, examiners suspected that she'd already been lifeless for 2 to 3 weeks. But after the autopsies, coroners still weren't able to help the cops identify this girl. Typically, testing the victim's fingerprints would be one of the first things detectives would do, but unfortunately, the girl was so far into the decomposition phase that no fingerprints could be taken. The story of the corpse's discovery spread around town, and people didn't like that the victim's name was unknown. So what else did they do than come up with a terribly insensitive nickname, Tent Girl? A sketch artist was hired to draw the girl's face, and that sketch was plastered around town in hopes that she would be identified. Officers got a lot of leads about missing people who'd look like the girl on the flyer, but detectives went through each and every lead, slowly ruling them out due to inconsistencies in details like the victim's height and hair color. Filtering through the leads, there were a few that stuck out to investigators. One was about a girl named Doris who went missing while hitchhiking south from Maryland. Another was a statement from a trucker who was driving on the highway nearby. He said he saw 2 hitchhikers around the area the body was discovered in. One was a guy, one was a girl, and they both struck the driver as odd because it was rainy and they weren't wearing the right clothes. The detectives thought maybe the hitchhiker was Doris. That lead became pretty hot because someone else called the police after that saying he picked up 2 hitchhikers on April 14th who also weren't dressed for the weather. Okay, has anyone stopped to think these people may just not have rainy attire? If they're hitchhiking, they could be traveling through and just weren't prepared for the rain. So this caller said the hitchhiking couple was fighting in the back seat, so he legit pulled over and was like, y'all need to get out. The arguing is just too much. Police tried to find more information about the couple, but before they could, they were informed that Doris had returned home and was reunited with her family. Another promising lead had to do with a teen named Debbie Crane. Debbie matched the description of the unidentified victim, and she was reported missing on March 3rd, 2 months before Wilbur discovered the body. Debbie was last spotted getting into a blue Chevrolet Corvair with her boyfriend. No one knew where she went after, and the timeline of her disappearance could have matched up with the case. But based on the autopsy of the unidentified girl, that would mean if it were Debbie, she may have been held hostage for a month or so, which was not off the table. So detectives brought Debbie's parents to the station to look at a sketch and see if it was a match for their daughter. When Debbie's mom looked at the sketch, she almost fainted. That's how much it looked like her. But the closer she looked, the more she noticed a few minor differences. That had to be a really sad and weird day for Debbie's parents. So officials were able to obtain Debbie's dental records, and they loosely matched that of the corpse. But that couldn't be confirmed 100%. Detectives also showed the corpse to Debbie's mom and aunt in hopes that they could identify her. Again, the state of the body didn't allow for a positive ID to be made. How awful. Even still, it seems to me that a lot of people did think that the girl was Debbie. If they went through the trouble of comparing dental records and showing the body to relatives, there had to be a lot of detectives on board with the identification. But one day, they received an anonymous call from a man who said, Debbie Crane ain't that tent girl. You want to find her, go to Bradford, Pennsylvania. She's as alive as you are. And then he hung up. Shocked and confused, one of the detectives made the drive to Bradford, and the caller was right. Debbie was there, living with her boyfriend. Like, she didn't think to tell her mom or one friend or someone? Apparently, Debbie's boyfriend promised her he'd find them a place to live if she left with him. So that day, she was last seen in the blue Chevy they drove straight to Pennsylvania. When the detective found this out, he sent the couple home, and it was back to the beginning with the investigation. Although police weren't getting any more hits from missing persons cases, they had sent off the tent bag, rope, and a towel from the scene in hopes that they'd find out more information about where those items were from or who they belonged to. But the reports came back, and all the material was common and couldn't be pinned to a specific manufacturer or anything. Well, before the victim or suspect could be named in this case, another crime happened that was spookily similar. A 16-year-old girl named Candace went missing from her home in Philadelphia in early March. There was a huge search for her, and eventually a group of fishermen found Candace floating in a creek 1 month later. She was stripped of her clothes and wrapped in a bag that was tied up with a rope, just like the body Wilbur found. It was apparent to investigators that they needed to look into this very closely because they might be dealing with the same perp. In Candace's autopsy report, medical examiners said there was no identifiable COD and noted discoloration on the right side of the skull. Those were the same findings in the other girl's autopsy. The two victims had also been stuffed in the bag, tied up, and dumped in a very similar manner. But detectives weren't able to find out much information about the perp, and in turn, nothing new about the body in Kentucky. So another sketch of Tent Girl was drawn with a few slight changes to her facial shape and features. A bunch of leads came in, but they were all weeded out one by one. By then, the body of the unidentified girl was in such a bad state, no more evidence could be collected or determined from it. So officials had her buried in an unmarked grave at Georgetown Cemetery. She had no headstone at first, but a bunch of locals who were really invested in the case raised money to get her one made after the fact. The headstone had the police sketch of her at the top with the text, "Tent Girl found May 17, 1968 on US Highway 25 North. Died about April 26, May 3rd, 1968. Height 5 feet 1 inch, weight 110 to 115 pounds, reddish brown hair, unidentified." Dang, that's so sad. Anyway, years passed, and it really seemed like the case would stay cold forever. But wait until you hear this. Wilbur Riddle, the man who initially found the girl, had since retired and moved away from the Georgetown area. Well, his daughter, Lori, started dating a guy named Todd Matthews, and one day she brought him over to meet her dad. The two got to talking about the case, and Todd became extremely invested in the story of Tent Girl. Like Wilbur, he still wanted to provide this girl's family with closure after all those years. So Todd decided to review the case and see if there was any new information or leads that were missed on the initial investigation. Todd and Lori eventually got married, but they had some relationship troubles because Todd was so committed to solving this case. He was looking at other missing persons reports, reading all of the old newspapers, FBI notes, everything. And when Todd got to the part about the white towel, he read that specialists at the FBI lab thought the material of the towel was very similar to a diaper or towel for babies. So Todd started to speculate that maybe this girl was older than detectives thought she was. He wrote a letter to the police to present his findings, as well as the theory that Tent Girl was older and may have had a baby. Todd asked officials to exhume her body for another autopsy because they would be able to tell by her pelvis if she had given birth before, but they never got back to him. Over the years, Todd continued to seek answers, and he was super committed. He visited the gravesite hours away and talked to the local newspaper to see if they had any updates on the case. When 1992 rolled around and people started talking about this thing called the internet, Todd thought he might be able to use that as a tool for this case. So he started saving money and finally made enough money to buy a computer. Todd used his new computer to look up missing persons cases and search throughout online databases like the Doe Network, which helps identify missing people. While I commend his dedication, it seems like Todd wasn't paying as much attention to his family as he was to this case. His young son often complained about him always being on the computer, and he spent quite a bit of money on his research too, but it was all about to pay off. So one day, Todd was scrolling through missing persons websites about to fall asleep sleep when he saw something that caught his eye. It was a post about a girl named Barbara Westbrook who went missing in the Lexington area in 1967. As Todd read on about Barbara, he knew she was Tent Girl. They had the same hair color and height, the timeline matched up, and so did the location. So the post was written by Barbara's sister, Rosemary. Todd emailed Rosemary and tried to get more information about Barbara to confirm that she really was Tent Girl. Rosemary said Barbara vanished in December of 1967 when she was 24 years old. At the time, she was married and had one kid. Barbara's husband was a carnival worker, so it was probably hard for her family to get in touch with them. Some of Barbara's relatives had no idea she was missing for years. And another one of Barbara's sisters said she reported Barbara as missing, but her husband said she'd run off with another man. After speaking with Barbara's family, Todd was certain this was the woman that the police had been looking for all along. So he went to the authorities, who exhumed Tent Girl's body. Her DNA was compared to a sample from inside Rosemary's cheek, and it was a match. Finally, the poor, unidentified woman could be remembered by her real name, and her family would get the closure that they deserved. As I speculated, Barbara's husband, George Earl Taylor, is the main suspect in the case. He had since passed away, so we'll probably never know. But most people think it was George because he was known for being aggressive and impulsive. He worked for a carnival, and the green bag Barbara was found in was similar to material used in carnival tents. And she was dumped on the highway to Ohio, which is the state George's family lived in. While we still don't really know what happened to Barbara or why, I'm so glad that we finally know who she was. This case was one of those heartbreaking stories that seemed to have no end in sight, but thanks to modern technology, there was a resolution. It's crazy to think that if Todd hadn't been scrolling on his computer that day, Barbara may never have been identified. So if you ever find yourself reading about or watching a video about a missing persons case, a quick share of that post might go a long way. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.